everyone, welcome back to Honor for Hire, my turn-based RPG being developed in the Godot engine. The last couple of months have been pretty good in terms of progress. I've not only added the beginnings of a day-night cycle, but I've also created a great deal of new art, including some new animations for the night, or refining a few of my older textures. Time to showcase what I've been up to. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, join the Discord, and leave any questions or suggestions in the comments below. With that out of the way, let's begin. We're going to start at the very top with one of the first new pieces of art I made, these broken tiles. I decided to have a few special designs scattered throughout, but for the most part it was just breaking apart the squares and adding cracks and other detailing to them. I also created 5 larger variations with unique patterns on all of them. I want to have these scattered throughout various locations in the meadow, perhaps hinting at some ancient secret that the kingdom holds. The lore and world building still needs to be properly fleshed out though, so they're just tiles for the time being. To go with these tiles, I decided to design a set of walls. I wanted both intact and ruined variations, so I decided to start with the intact ones. I also took the time to design a set of stairs, which you can see right here, since I wanted to try them out in this art style. Once I got all of the walls done, I went ahead and created 3 ruined variations for each of them. They're cracked apart and overrun with vines, and while I might want to add a bit more breakage to some of them in the future, I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. These will hopefully add to the atmosphere I aim to create in the meadow, and I might use some of the overgrown ones in the forest later on. Moving on to the next piece, this is one that I've had in the works for quite a while, the teleporter. These will be situated around the map and provide a way for the character to jump back and forth between different locations. I designed a crest for each of the locations so the player can tell which one they're going to jump to, which one the teleporter is tuned to, and I've selected a color for each of them to turn when they're active. After I got these platforms done, it was time to move on to the actual teleporter platform. I designed the rough draft first, but I didn't like it very much. So I went ahead and got to work on designing a proper monument, and this is the final design that I settled on. As you can see, I designed miniature versions of all the region crests, which go on the 4 pillars that are surrounding it, and I added little bits of weathering to all the bricks to give it a more worn down feel. Finally, I added a bit of grass around the bottom and a brick texturing in the middle here, which, as you'll see later, I used as a basis for another piece of art. But the last bit that I needed to complete for the teleporter was the actual animation. I used a blank version of one of the teleporter pads to design it, beginning with a white circle coming in from the outside. I then drew a shockwave coming out from the base as a pillar begins to shoot up into the sky. It emanates out from the beam, which spends a few frames at max channel before coming back to where it began, with the shockwave disappearing at the end. Once I get it in the engine, this animation will be applied over any of the 5 teleporter platform textures, and I'll just have to figure out what to do with the player's sprite during the process. More than likely what I'll do is I'll make the sprite flash white, then go invisible and emit particles upwards as the beam goes out. Once I got some of this new stuff done though, I looked back at my older textures and realized that some of them needed to change. The level of detail I'm including in a lot of the newer sprites, and even in some of the older ones, like the houses and the well, did not match very well with the plain green of the grass at all. It was time to give this a full redesign. I took some inspiration from a few other games, and decided to make the center of the grass have lighter and darker colored blades. The main details I was adding were in the edges though. I gave it a lot more shape and depth, and now you'll be able to tell quite easily where different patches of grass start and end. It looks a ton better, and the only question I have for you guys is one of preference. Which color of grass between these two looks better for the meadow? Next up on the redesign list, you may have spotted already, the path tile. Now the old one, it looks fine, but I wasn't happy with how bright and cluttered it was. It took me a while working in the tiled mode in Sprite, my savior when it comes to designing tiles, mostly because I was struggling to get the larger shapes to all mesh together. Once I got a pattern that I liked, I took note of how the inner layer of the teleporter uses the darker colors to add some accents and weathering to the edges. I then implemented that in the new path tile, and this was the final product, which I also made a stone variation of. By mixing all of these different shades together, I got a good level of detail that's a lot easier on the eye and less cluttered than the original. With that, all of the redesigning that I wanted to do was complete, at least for now. Next up came animating time. I knew that I needed to start tackling more characters because, well, there's a lot to do. So I started with another one of the meadow enemies. This time it was the slime. First time animating something that doesn't move like a human, and I must say, it went pretty well. The slime has two animations that I needed to complete. The jump, which is how the slime moves around, and the idle for when it's sitting still. The most important thing when it came to animating the slime was the squishiness, so I made sure to go overboard with it to make sure that it had a satisfying effect. During all of these frames, you can see how the slime is stretching and squashing when it moves, but the end result looks a lot less ridiculous than these individual frames. Here it is in all its squishy glory jumping along. And here it is just sitting still. It's a little less squishy in total because obviously there's less impact on the character. Now when the next devlog comes around, I might start working on programming this guy, so stay tuned to see more of him. Now the last and longest stop for animations is the knight, who I'm currently still working on. Not only have I redone all of his walking animations to make them look better, in the feet especially, I've also made him carry the sword at all times. As you can see, this is his updated walking animation, and the sword now swings back and forth just like the sword goblin. Perhaps most importantly, I've finally gotten started with, as you can see here, all of his abilities. As I've shown in previous devlogs, I have all of the abilities decided for each of the characters, at least so far. So I took a look at the descriptions of the 5 basics for the knight and got cracking with the front-facing direction. First up, sweep attack. This move is almost identical to the Goblin Chieftain spin attack, but since I wasn't satisfied with that, I took time to redo it before moving on to the Knight's version. The new one spins much faster, with less in-between frames, before having the sprite swing the sword out in a certain direction in the final 2 frames. It makes the attack look much faster and more aggressive, and gives the look that I was going for initially. With that done, it's a simple case of transferring the sprite over and changing some colors and helmet shape to get the first basic ability completed. The second one was Shield Bash. I took the shield I designed for a skeleton enemy, which you can see right here, and slapped it onto the knight. I gave him a bit of a wind-up, having him lean back before launching the shield and his body forward. The last bit was a hit effect, a white blast, which you can see here, that resonates out from the center of the shield before dissipating as the knight regains his balance. It was one of the cleanest character animations I've made so far, and I didn't think I could top it, until, of course, I moved down the list. Well, not this next one. Taunt was incredibly simple and kind of boring, so we're going to skip right over it. This is what it looks like, get a good long look, and on we go. This is the animation that I was most proud of after the fact, Charge. With this attack, the knight dashes forward before attacking the enemy in front of him, stunning it and potentially knocking it back. I toyed around with the idea of him pulling out a spear, but his weapon arsenal was growing quite fast, and I'd already done that with a spear goblin. I decided on the sword that swings alongside him as he charges before swiping out in front at the end. This was easy enough, but the part I'm really proud of was the dirt that kicks up from his feet as he dashes. It looks incredibly clean, and the speed of the dash is just right. This one turned out really good, and now all I have to mess with is the speed of the knight in engine, which might be easier said than done. Finally, the Holy Javelin. The knight raises his hand and the javelin materializes from thin air. He then throws it, moving the whole time, and I plan to spawn a turn-based projectile that can pass through any number of enemies before disappearing upon hitting a wall. With that, the knight's animations were complete. At least for a single direction. Back is fully complete, but I'm still working on left and right, so expect to see him all the way done before the next devlog. Now, I'll briefly showcase the health bar I implemented. It's a texture progress node that updates with a percentage of the character's health, and I designed a neat little overlay for it, which you can see right here. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, I added enemy health bars as well. Last but certainly not least, I've gotten started with the very basics of atmospherics, namely a day and night cycle. I don't want to bore you with the fine details, but it boils down to manipulation of a canvas modulate node. I have it tweening back and forth from the brightest color to a deep blue. The hard part came when I decided to make life difficult for myself, of course, as any game developer must do, and have the time only move when the character does. As you can see, I connected the signals in right here. When the knight's turn begins, the tween starts as long as it's not already active, and when his turn ends, if it's already active, it stops. The flipping back and forth of the colors was definitely the hardest part to figure out, but eventually I got it working, and as we all know, if something is working and the final product is nice and happy, I'm going to sit back and not touch it unless I absolutely need to. I think that's going to be it for this devlog though. I'm excited to see where all these features go in the future, and I think there's two possibilities for the next video. Number 1, I transfer the game over to Godot 4.0. I'm still in the older version, so it would be good to finally get the project updated and have access to all these sweet new tileset features. Number 2, I work on more enemies and implement the knight's abilities. Now, both of these will take a good chunk of time, so they'll both be good choices for a devlog. I've also had a brainwave recently for a bit of a smaller side project, a puzzle game of sorts, so expect to hear a bit more about that game in the near future because it might provide a good break from Honor for Hire here if I ever feel the need to just take a step back and slow things down a bit. Leave any questions or suggestions in the comments below, make sure to join the Discord, and as always, have a great day everyone. Take care.